if you don't speak up, if you don't show your work, if you don't share opinions, that's not good at all. It's exactly the opposite of what I was taught. It was impossible for me to ask a question because I was thinking, they would think I'm stupid, because if the question is stupid, they'll think, she's stupid, why we hired her? Which sounds ridiculous, right? But that's it. That's what a 25 years old who spent all their life in one little small country of 6.5 million people was taught. And what I achieved after that, I didn't even dream about it because it was so beyond any type of dream I could have. And my dreams were really kind of limited. Okay, can I go to Athens, or can I go to Vienna, or become head of department? That was my dream.
Real quick before we get into the interview, one of the first exercises I run with executive teams is mapping their business portfolio to visualize the current work in progress and how it aligns to the overall business strategy. Now, without exception, every time I run this exercise, the gap between the current state and desired state is far wider than every executive believed, hoped, or even imagined. I've put the exact template to use, how I do this, and made it free for all of you to download by following the link in the comments. Go get your copy and let me know how it goes. Now back to the show. Welcome to the Unlearn Podcast. In this episode, we sit down with Annie Filipova, an inspiring leader whose journey spans across continents, industries, and perspectives. Annie is a former international banking executive with over 20 years of experience, including setting up and managing 3 banks like Citibank and transforming a $2 billion business across 16 countries as a Regional COO for Citibank Treasury and Trade Solutions in Asia. Her path to success wasn't conventional. Her career was born for a passion for travel, navigating rejections and seizing opportunities to explore the world. In this show, we look at 3 very specific aspects of her extraordinary story. 1, growing up behind the Iron Curtain in Eastern Europe and finding ways to explore the world from within a closed community. Secondly, learning how and when to speak up, find and fight anxiety, and take bold risks in high-stakes moments. And finally, mastering the art of bringing people together across diverse backgrounds and cultures to drive alignment and decision-making in complex global organizations. Today, she's rebalancing her own life around a portfolio career. Annie brings wisdom and her dynamic experience, offering insights in leadership, transformation, and the power of reinvention. This is a fabulous show with great insights into her own personal story and learnings along the way. So let's listen for how it got started for Annie. Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode, and it greatly supports our podcast.
I was born in communist Bulgaria, behind the Iron Curtain. Unfortunately, after the Second World War, we were under Russian influence. And we were in that Eastern Europe bloc, kind of shielded from everywhere. We couldn't travel anywhere. It was very difficult. So I saw the world through books, and as a child, I was reading a lot. My grandmother had this huge bookcase in her house, and every summer I would spend all the summer with my grandmother. So I would read everything that was there. And the first 2 books as a child, which had a big impact on me and on what I wanted to do in life, which is a bit funny, is Pippi the Longstocking, and the other one was Carlson Who Lives on the Roof. So these are the 2 books which, as a child, maybe I was 7, 8 years old, and I was reading about this little girl who was traveling all over the world, and she was in Borneo and Singapore and Hong Kong and Calcutta, and all these names were really, I was so mystified about, my goodness, what is this world out there? And since that age, I always wanted to go and see what is outside of our country and outside of our little pond. And this was really what drove my life, I would say, and even my career, because the desire to travel, to see new cultures, that was what I wanted to do. But growing up in Bulgaria, it's a communist regime, so it's better for you not to speak a lot, not to stand out. You better be part of the crowd, the gray crowd. Everybody's should be equal, the same, and this is how I was brought up. I had a rebellious character, but still, I mean, I would not speak up. I'll be submissive, etc., because that's how everybody was. One of my things was, okay, what is the world outside? And the second thing, because I come from a working class family, we never had money. We never had a car. We used to live in a concrete building in the suburbs, which still exist in many Eastern European countries. We had it was really pretty grim, gray kind of building. So nothing exciting. We didn't have money, and I thought to myself, I just want to have a job, which actually will make me senior, and I'll become the boss, and I'll have money. So these were the two lines of thought for me. I started in a Bulgarian bank. I really wanted. So my idea was, when I finished university, is that, okay, if I want to travel, I have to work in an international organization, because nobody pays you to travel, right? At that time, it was out of question. Today, maybe there is such job, and I know for sure there is, but at that time, nobody would pay you for travel. So I said, okay, it has to be an international organization. And after I finished university, I applied to all the international organizations in Bulgaria, because when I was finishing university, Bulgaria abolished communism and it was opening to the world, and there were many international companies coming. So I applied to Shell, to McDonald's, to Nestle, all the big names you hear. And all of them said no. So I was crushed. I was like, that's it. All my dreams gone. On day one, I was thinking I'm going to change the world, and there I'm sitting. Everybody says no to me, and then I had to work somewhere. And at that time, finding job was with a newspaper. So you have a newspaper, and you have, okay, these are the ads. And I found a Bulgarian bank. So I said, okay, then I'm going to work in a bank, because at that time banking was becoming really, very prestigious to work in a bank, and also lucrative, better salaries, etc. And I started in that Bulgarian bank, and I learned like crazy. Anything they wanted to teach me, I would say yes. I would never say no. On one side, I would always look for international banks. I was thinking, okay, I'm in banking. Let me do the best out of it. So I started in banks, not because I wanted so much. It was because it happened like this. And once I was in, I actually said, okay, let me continue. And this is how I was looking for an international bank. The first international bank that came, I applied. It was a Greek bank. This is where I learned my first Greek words and phrases. Then it was a Central and Eastern European bank, Raiffeisen, which is based in Austria. But it was covering Central and Eastern Europe. So I said, okay, I'm going to travel in Central and Eastern Europe. And after that, it was Citi. And as you could imagine, joining an international organization, if you don't speak up, if you don't show your work, if you don't share opinions, that's not good at all. It's exactly the opposite of what I was taught. And I really struggled. I was really... It was impossible for me to ask a question, because I was thinking, they will think I'm stupid, because if the question is stupid, they'll think, she's stupid, why we hired her. Which sounds ridiculous, right? But that's it. That's what a 25 years old who spent all their life in one little small country of 6.5 million people was taught. So, and what I achieved after that, I didn't even dream about it, because it was so beyond any type of dream I could have. And my dreams were really kind of limited. Okay, can I go to Athens, or can I go to Vienna, or become head of department? That was my dream.
Yeah, no, it's amazing to hear these types of stories. I think for many people, the world you're describing, even like living behind the Iron Curtain, right? It seems like it's a time that maybe many people struggle to understand, like what that was like growing up, and this notion of exploring the world through literature and books as a way to gather information, to be inspired, like that resonates with me massively, right? I grew up in Ireland in a very small town. It was maybe 5,000 people. At that time, most people, I like, especially as a child, like not many people traveled overseas unless they were, it was they were either emigrating to America or Australia or to the UK, or but the idea of a vocational holiday was really quite fancy and something only a few people did. But the thing about growing up on an island too, as well, is I also felt it was there was only so much, right? After a certain period of time, Ireland is relatively small, right? Like you sort of see a lot of it, and it's different in different parts, and a fantastic place. But there's a boundary to it at the end of the day. And for me, also, I was always fascinated by different parts of the world. What was it like there? Why did people emigrate? What were these big cities like? What are other countries' languages like? Different food. And it was certainly a huge motivation for me too, as well, is to get exposure to that. Once I had finished university, I had the opportunity to go and live in America for a while when I was in university. I moved to the UK and Scotland after I finished studying, Australia, and all of these places just encouraged me to keep seeing more, because it was fascinating. Like I was growing. One of my favorite seminal experiences was actually backpacking around South America when I was 23 on my own, and I couldn't speak any Spanish or Portuguese. I just went. And it was, it was probably one of the best learning experiences for me, because I had to figure things out on my own. I had to learn how to deal with people. I had to learn how to, problem solve in real time. But it gave me a huge amount of self-belief, if you will, that I could do something that was uncomfortable, that was unfamiliar, that was new, and sort of figure my way out through it, which was, again, certainly one of the main learning experiences for me in my life. So I really love the way you're describing, you seeking this opportunity to, start to travel and get exposure. And yeah, as you say, finance and banking is just a vehicle, as you will, as that presented itself to you in that manner, rather than this sort of, I dream of being a COO of a treasury bank, my whole life. So, tell us more then, and this notion, as you say, of just some of these cultural things that were almost conditioned around you, like not speaking up, not standing out from the crowd, right? And as someone who's also worked in a lot of, US, North America, and I suppose many companies now, this notion of, stepping forward, presenting your ideas, putting them out there is a huge part of developing as a leader, because, you have to help people understand the direction you think the company should go. Of course, you listen, but, you also have to be able to lead. So share a little bit about how, you learned to lead, because, as you say, as you went into Citi, you had this amazing career growth where you were looking after entire regions of people from many different countries, be that around Europe, Asia Pac, all these different areas where, you had to sort of, if you will, synthesize the viewpoint of a collective of different countries and get them aligned and working well together. So what were some of the things that you had to learn about bringing all of those people together across sort of disparate regions and countries as you started to accelerate in your career?
That's a great question. And the first thing I would say is that if you want to become a good leader, you have to be interested in people. what people want, what makes them tick, what drives them, what are their wishes, what are their aspirations. This is something that you have to be interested in. I'm not saying that you should know in depth of the desires of every person, but you should have an eye about that, and you should have a sense, because if you don't, you're not going to be very successful, because you cannot pretend that you're interested in people. You cannot pretend that you care about their growth and development. You can pretend that much, and then they'll discover you. They will know that you are just pretending, and they're not going to trust you. So that was my guiding principle when I start to work with a team, with a group of people. I try to understand what drives them. And the second thing I will do is be very transparent and open, no matter what, because I think people trust you when they know your intentions and they know who you are. They just don't need to guess what you're going to do in this situation or that situation. They don't need to interpret what you're saying. You just have to be able to say the things as they are. Of course, not blur them out and be rude and, not mold it to the different audience. But it's one thing to present something in a way that will sync with the audience, and it's another to present it in a way that you're not saying everything. So I think that these are two things that I always did, and they helped me immensely. When I am working with people, is the other thing is I'm trying to understand what do they want from me? What are they expecting from me? And then link it with what I expect from them. And when I was in my job of chief operating officer, my boss always was saying that I'm somebody who would somehow work out the consensus because of these qualities that I had, and that was a good thing to have, very good thing to have, because you know how people are going in different directions, they have different opinions, but at one point you have to, the majority have to go with one decision. So the faster and the better you get to that point, it's better for the organization you're leading. When you start traveling and moving from, let's say, Europe to Asia, and even within Europe, the different nationalities have completely different upbringing, way of thinking, wishes and desires. So every time I would go to a different country, I would sit down and learn about the country, learn about the habits, learn about what is good, what people think are the good things, what people think are bad things, what people think are rude things to do. Because, you know, sometimes the things that we think are acceptable are completely non-acceptable in a different country. So for instance, if you go to, the simple thing in Japan, nobody shake hands, and that's a habit. So the simple thing, if you go and bow, and that shows them that you read and you understand what is their culture. And that little simple thing. You don't need to discover the whole country and the whole culture and everything in the ethos and everything. But you have to have these day-to-day small habits that people are accustomed to. And you exhibit them and you show them, look, I am interested. I have checked what works and I'm doing it. And that is a great door opener to anybody, because you show respect. You show respect from the beginning, regardless after that whether you're going to agree or disagree, or have a quarrel or heated argument. It doesn't matter. The thing is that you show that you respect, that there is a respect, and that makes things easier, especially in a difficult situation.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. It's one of these things I have certainly learned over the years is picking up the cultural cues when you go into different environments can have a massive effect on creating a base level of respect, as you're describing. It's really interesting, right? Because I think if you walk into different country, different region, and you impress upon them your culture about how you meet people, and it does show, if you will, a sort of an ignorance to what matters there. I still remember, one of the first times. Japan is an interesting one. I was there for one of the book tours for Unlearn, and the book had been translated into Japanese, which was fantastic for me. And I got to go to Japan and spend time there in Tokyo and do workshops and had translators. It was a fascinating experience. But one of the most interesting experiences was going to meet companies, like actual companies themselves. And, I was lucky enough that some people that I had worked with before were kind enough to explain to me some of the etiquettes of meetings, right? That there would only, and one of the classics is sort of, the most senior person in the room is the only person who will talk, or at least they'll give the cue about, what they believe, and, the rest of the group falls into line. And, for me, if I hadn't have been given that guidance ahead of meeting that company, it would have been an absolute disaster, because my culture programming had been, you go in these sort of very dynamic rooms where you're putting things up on Post-it notes on walls, and you're ideating, and you're trying to pull opinions from everybody in the room, regardless of their seniority, rank, or their file, to get the best ideas, and the best ideas propagate through that process. Doing that in Japan from day one was probably the most disrespectful thing you could do, to totally flip a room, So what was fascinating for me was, because being cued on that, and then finding a way to have this sort of conversation that they wanted to have, but culturally their systems were not designed to have it from the beginning, at least, on the way that I had worked with companies to do that before, and but by learning that and going through the process of it, it was, it was fascinating, to sort of learn that. But I also experienced it in many other different ways, as you say, that were much closer to, where I grew up, right? I still remember one of the most interesting things, when I started working, moving from Ireland and working in bigger cities, like places like London or in America. And I did really feel it quite interesting, how people would almost overpress their ideas upon you, and how to sort of manage scenarios where you have overbearing people, because that's what in those companies it sort of dictated, right? Like what was the way to have a voice when you're in a room with, the majority are extroverted, loud people that are fighting to speak rather than listen and respond. And that was also a very fascinating experience for me too, as well, like learning how to cope with, all these very loud voices that really just wanted to share what they thought rather than hearing what other people think. And funnily enough, Post-it notes were a bit of a savior for me in that scenario, because I found that when I was in a group situation, and using these different design thinking tools, having time where there was silence and people had to write things down on paper and then put them up on the wall, it actually gave a chance for more ideas for someone like myself and sort of my conditioning at the time, to get more ideas out, because I was able to think and sort of post them, and then the debate would move to the merits of ideas on a wall rather than just people's opinions. Again, so there's always these sort of fascinating things that spin around, and then, but they've, it's been a fascinating journey for me to think about how how those dynamics matter in the workplace and how learning how to adjust to them regardless of the context.
No, absolutely. And while we were talking, I was thinking about one of the difficulties I had was that just try and not take everything people say to me personally, because sometimes in a heated discussion, people say stuff or they just dismiss you, or and that would initially in early part of my career, that would put me into complete kind of lockdown. I'll be speechless because I was thinking, oh, how can they do this to me? And I would then beat myself for being silly and for not giving the right idea and not speaking. Why did I speak up? Why should have stayed quiet and all this? And it took me such a long time to actually understand that's how real life is, right? You can be polite, but in the same time you cannot be a pushover. And if you are pushover, you're just going to not succeed. It's as simple as that. And there will always be people who are louder than you. There always will be people who are smarter than you. There will always be people who will shut you up or be disrespectful. But that doesn't mean you did something wrong, right? It doesn't. It's just that they responded to whatever you said, and you don't know. Maybe they thought, "Oh, she said something smart. I better shut her down." So she thinks that's not the case. No, sometimes it is that, and there are different tactics people use in negotiations. All tactics work, so you have to be aware of that and stop beating yourself and take everything personal. And that was another turning point for me when I just realized, yeah, that's it. I don't need to take everything so personal. And then everything changed after that. And if somebody says something, I would turn back and copy the tone, and then suddenly things started changing. It was very interesting to see.
Well, these are very interesting, uncomfortable moments for people, right? As they sort of develop in their life experience, work experience, whatever, where you sort of have to get comfortable taking risks by putting your ideas out there, right? And I can still think about. I remember once I was working in a software company, which was a great company. And, I'd been part of this leadership development program. And part of the program was that you got to go, there was these, big leadership meetings every quarter where the heads of all the different countries would come together. And then they would invite one or two of, us fledgling little, up and comers to these events, right? And part of me was excited because it was something interesting and a chance to meet a lot of these other, great leaders in the company. But another part of me was just dreading the experience. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to say? What if they ask me a question? How do all these things you're describing? How do I not sound stupid? But I also felt this sort of pressure to also contribute to. And I still remember sitting there through the first one or two sessions where, all these very senior, very established and smart people, were sort of hashing out these sort of tough things that we have to solve. Like, what office would we open and what new services should we bring to market and how do we attract the right talent? And, I still remember the one moment where I was like, oh, I was waiting for oh, when am I going to have a thought that I can add to this conversation with these people, and it was such a moment of adrenaline and anxiety and all these things. And then there was a moment where I did manage to say something and it was quite, it was provocative enough that people were I got reaction from folks, much like you described, where people were like, well, what do you mean by that? Or why should you have that viewpoint? Or, I was certainly challenged on my view, but it was, part of me, even responding, I still had this adrenaline running through me as I said, whether a reason how we might attract the right people to work in the company, or why we might be struggling, to find those people. But wow, after I did it, I had to sit there for a few minutes and like recompose myself again and go, okay, what, did I sound stupid? Is that okay? Like I had all these things running through my head, But but one of the kindest things somebody did, we had a break after that session and 2 or 3 people came over to me and they were like, wow, thanks for sharing that point. Like they encouraged me for speaking up. And one of my good friends now actually came over to me just to remind me that they did disagree with my viewpoint and thought it was wrong. But it was quite, even then it just gave me this, it gave me a confidence after taking a risk. And people were kind enough to either recognize that, but also help me with it. And then they probably regret it now. Now they probably can't shut me up from sharing my opinion with things. But it was part of the process, and I had to do it to sort of push through.
And the other thing I was doing, which is very effective for that particular thing, you just have an idea, you want to share it, but you don't know how it is going to be accepted. You want to take the risk, but you still need a little bit more push. And the best thing is to look for allies in the meeting. There are, let's say, 10 people in the meeting. Go and speak to some of them. Get a discussion going before the core kind of meeting. Talk to them. Get them on your side. Sometimes I would go and say, okay, I'll say this. You say that. Okay, we'll do that. And all these alliances help you get your confidence levels through the meeting. And even if you say something and one of your supporters, so to say, yeah, that's a good idea, let's think about this. I mean, that's enough for you for the adrenaline to subside a little bit and you have your cool head back on again. But that works. That I would recommend people do that, because at the end of the day, what happens in a meeting is very much depends on what happens during the meeting, but a lot of things already are set in motion just before that, and you have to be part of all that so you can contribute fully during the meeting. So the preparation for it, especially if it is something important, is so key.
To talk a little bit more about this, right? As you said, when you were in working in Citibank, massive global organization, and whoever you were reporting to identified that you're very good at building this consensus, right? So, some people are probably sitting here thinking, wow, Annie was like running around the corridors of power, sort of making back deals and organizing these types of. But there's you gave a hint towards some very explicit techniques, at least how I heard them, of when there's key sessions or meetings coming up, even testing your ideas with a smaller subset of the group is a great way to make your idea more robust and build your confidence, right? That I'm thinking this, what are you thinking, right? And it's a great way to sort of, as you say, work towards consensus, or at least not necessarily consensus, but a decision, right? Which is actually, what you're talking about rather than consensus. So tell us some more, of the things you learned in those sort of high stakes, high, pressure environments where you've a lot of different players with, as you say, different wants, different needs, different expectations, different agendas and incentives. So what were some of the other things that you learned in that world?
Well, I think the main thing that helped me drive people around an idea was because of my background. So I've been in many different areas of the bank. I've been in back office, I've been in operations, customer service, relationship management, product management. I was in compliance, HR, IML, risk, audit. So I know the whole spectrum of works, of type of jobs, type of people that do the work, what are their pluses and minuses, what are their issues, what are their aspirations. So, and when you work on something, let's say a new product, it's so good to know what are different people. Pay attention, be respectful, and interested in what are these different departments have to say, because often people in sales and product, they look down on operations. They think of a product and say, okay, they throw it over the wall, say operations, now do it. Yeah. And you're just stupid, we just give it to you, you do it the way we say. And the same with legal, with compliance, etc. And at the end of the day, no product will work well if you don't have the feedback from operations, because operations do that day in and day out, and they know all the intricate small things that can derail even the best product in the world. So it was that thing that you have to hear everyone. You can't just stay with, let's say, only the product people and think you know the whole story. No, we don't. You have to see the sales feedback. You have to see the product feedback, compliance. You have to see what will be the impact on the client from regulations. I mean, did anyone think about this? So that was probably what helped me to have the reputation of somebody who understands the different type of jobs and the different type of not products, but departments, and how they fit into the end product. So that was, if I would get something from product saying, okay, this is what we have to do. I always recommend, okay, bounce it off with operations, because they know better. And instead of, waiting till the meeting when a product guy says, okay, this is what you're doing, and the operations says, no, we can't do this because 1, 2, 3. Why waste this time, right? Why waste this time? It could be done before you even go to any meeting. So I think getting a lot of diverse viewpoints, especially when you do something new, is very, very important, because otherwise you might end up with something far less than ready to be launched on the market. And that actually, I learned this when, when I became a CEO of Treasury and Trade Solutions. This is like a transactional business. And I started in 2016. 2015. And around 2016, the whole the banking sector was in a moment of reconsidering what is going on. And all the fintech, the new coming digitally born companies were really disrupting the sector.
Right, the challenger banks were really on the rise at that stage, yeah.
Yeah, and we had to start thinking, okay, what we are going to do, and we had to move. Let's say even simple payment. I'll give you an example. A simple payment in the past would go from person A to person B for 3 days, right? It will be that was the common thing, 3 days. And then we had to build something that the payment goes from one A to B in 3 seconds. So imagine the huge difference, right? I mean, in 3 days, if there was an issue, you could solve it in 3 seconds. No way you can do anything. So everything all the systems, the product, the supporting, the customer service, the client's trainings, everything has to be ready and tested well in advance, because once this is launched, you have no room for an error. Any error will cause a big delay in everything. Because if you have a payment 3 days and you find an error, you've sorted it out in the first 2 days, so the customer gets it on the third. But if it is only, even if it is several hours and they don't get it, obviously you haven't done your job properly. And that was when it was so important that the customer journey and the product journey is so important. So you have to go through every stage, what is happening at every stage, and make sure that that's what's happening, and that's okay with the regulations, and that's what the client is going to get, and how is the client going to feel, what are they going to get as feedback, is this meeting their requirements? So that became really customer centricity became really important, and that changed a lot of things, because we had to now have a really great process for everything new we were doing, a great new process where every single department is involved and every single department has a say, and that process has to be, cannot take months, it has to be quick. So it was interesting, but there were a lot of great things coming out of this new way of thinking, and people started working better together in a completely different way. So, and at that point of time, knowing all these departments, even I used to work in all of them, knowing how they operate, it was easier for me to understand what is going on and how to solve it, versus somebody who would only have sales experience or only product experience.
One of the things that it reminds me a lot of is in the software industry, about 2010, there was a new way of working that came out called continuous delivery, which was this idea that you, instead of deploying software, once every quarter or once a year in some instances, you would focus on trying to deploy software every day. And, this idea of like high velocity meant that everything that you were doing today, you couldn't do anymore. You had to find new ways of working. Smaller cross-functional teams were actually outperforming big programs of work with hundreds of thousands of people on them. And that idea of real agility, I think, was something that was, accelerated by technology in many ways, right? Like, because if customers' expectations went from 3 days to 3 seconds, you had to meet it, right? If people wanted software that they would own and see it evolve in front of them on a regular basis and keep getting better, like new features arriving. This is one of the promises, I guess, the challenger banks offered, right? That they would keep bringing new features and enhancements all the time, but it's a fundamentally different way of working to make that happen, as you say. And fascinating that you sort of got to experience that. What was the thing you had to unlearn the most as a leader, taking people through that type of a journey where it was focused on speed and velocity? And then a lot of as you say, even this example of like, you used to have time to correct in transaction, and then you had to move that to correct post transaction. Like, even that in itself sounds pretty scary. What were some of the things you had to unlearn there?
You just unlearn everything you know before that, because it's such a completely new way of doing things. And the main thing was that you have to listen to other people's views, because that might cost you the end product, right? And if you don't listen to people's view and you launch the product without operations involvement, you might have a failed product, and it will be very, very visible. So that was it took time. It took a lot of time for people to unlearn this and learn the new way. It's unbelievable how people don't listen and don't think that's important, and how much people think they know everything. It's ridiculous, but it is a fact, right? It's just so funny. I mean, the world is changing so much, and I mean, I will never. One of the big things, right? The internet, when it was invented, to get to 100 million users, it took 9 months. ChatGPT, to get to 100 million users, it took 5 days. That's a huge change, right? So imagine the time you have to fix something, and now you have to fix it as it goes. You have to see what's going on and be able. You have a system behind it, so you can fix all the issues in a way that nobody notices their issues. And for that, you have to listen to what the specialists have to say. And the other thing you have to unlearn is that you don't have all the information by yourself. It's not possible that you will have everything. And that's why you have to go to the people. You have to identify who are these right people who actually are specialists in that specific thing, and bring them in and get them into the process and get them to help. Because imagine that now we have all the information we want. I mean, everything is possible. Everything you want to know, you can find free of charge, fast. But the thing is, can you have it all in your head and make the right decisions only based on what you learned in that particular 1 hour? Not really. You have to rely on different people outside who actually have spent more time than you in that particular topic. So I think this is the main thing people have to unlearn, because with all the information we have, everybody is so overwhelmed and thinking that they have to learn it themselves. And that's not possible. It's not practical. Your brain is not designed like this. So you have to be able to rely on AI. You have to be able to rely on other specialists who will tell you what the right thing is.
Annie, it's been amazing to spend the last few hours, though, chatting to you about your ideas. Your journey is amazing, from, as you say, growing up behind the Iron Curtain to traveling the world, to leading teams all over the world. And we haven't even got to spend more time talking about what you do today and helping and coach other people on that journey themselves, which is a fantastic endeavor. It's been great to have you on the show to hear your story and share some of your examples. Thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you. That was fun. Thank you so much, Barry. And I wish you all the best.
You too.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or a review, as it helps others find our podcast. For more episodes and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.